You are going to die. And every single thing you are desperately clinging to right now, your status, your relationships, your carefully curated identity, the actual flesh on your bones out, it is all going to be violently stripped away.
Every last bit of it.
Right. It is the one unavoidable, terrifying, just absolute truth of our existence. And yet we spend our entire lives engineering these massive psychological fortresses to avoid looking directly at it.
Oh, absolutely. We build these elaborate, comfortable fictions, you know?
Exactly. We convince ourselves that if we just optimize our morning routines, or if we biohack our diets, accumulate enough wealth, or practice the right kind of sanitized, commodified mindfulness, we can somehow outrun the void. But you can't.
You absolutely cannot. And the more energy you expend trying to insulate yourself from that reality, the more catastrophic the final impact becomes.
Right.
Because we live in an era that worships comfort and permanence, which is, I mean, it's fundamentally delusional. We want spiritual enlightenment, but we want it delivered like an Amazon package.
Like it's convenient.
Right. Convenient, painless, and wrapped in bubble wrap.
Which perfectly brings us to our mission for this deep dive. Because you, sitting right there listening to this, I need you to mentally prepare yourself. We are not doing gentle self-help today.
No, definitely not.
We are plunging headfirst into one of the most uncompromising, intellectually savage philosophical frameworks ever conceived by the human mind. The Katha Upanishad.
It is hardcore spiritual alchemy.
It really is. Our goal today is to systematically tear down those psychological fortresses and look directly at the unvarnished architecture of the soul. We're looking at the terrifying machinery of mortality.
Well, it is essential to ground this historically before we just, tear into its mechanics. We are discussing a philosophy formulated somewhere between the 5th and 1st centuries BCE in ancient India.
So super old.
Right, but this isn't just dusty history to be glossed over. This text represents a brutal, bleeding-edge inflection point in human consciousness.
Oh, so?
It served as the precise bridge where ancient society shifted from mindless, mechanical, religious rituals, literally just burning things, to appease sky gods into intensely psychological, introspective, and frankly, existentially terrifying internal alchemy.
And the global resonance of this is staggering. Like when you look at the paper trail, this exact philosophy eventually bled into Europe and triggered a massive existential crisis among the greatest Western thinkers.
Oh, it completely broke their operating systems.
Literally broke them.
Yeah, when Latin translations finally circulated in the West, it was a philosophical earthquake. Arthur Schopenhauer, for instance, based an enormous portion of his metaphysical pessimism on this exact worldview.
Wow.
He realized that the Western obsession with material progress was a complete dead end. He praised this text for its unflinching surgical dismantling of the illusion of the material world. Ralph Waldo Emerson absorbed it too, and it fundamentally rewired his essays on the immortal self.
So these ideas possess a lethal potency.
Exactly. They do not just challenge your worldview, they are designed to incinerate it.
And here is the most brilliant, totally subversive part of the whole thing. The core narrative mechanism used to deliver this universe-shattering philosophy isn't a grizzled, ancient ascetic meditating in a cave.
No.
It's a kid.
Yep.
A shockingly pure 12-year-old boy named Nachiketa. This preteen willingly walks straight into the abyss and goes toe-to-toe with Yama, the literal Lord of Death.
And that narrative choice is deeply intentional. By placing a mortal child, the ultimate representation of pure, uncorrupted, fearless inquiry in a direct, unrelenting dialogue with death itself, the text establishes immediate psychological urgency.
It strips away all the adult bullshit.
Exactly. All the rationalizations and sophisticated defenses we use to avoid the subject. It forces you to confront the reality of your own impermanence. You cannot achieve any form of genuine spiritual rebirth without first being subjected to the meat grinder of psychological ego death.
But before we get into the cosmic voids, the nervous system shattering yoga, and this profound standoff with mortality, we have to start where the text starts.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah, and it doesn't begin in some ethereal heaven. It begins with a very human, very ugly family dispute fueled by pure, unadulterated ego.
Yes. The foundation of this entire cosmic journey is rooted in a highly grounded, almost embarrassingly domestic instance of bullshit hypocrisy.
Let's talk about Nachiketa's father, Vajrasrava. This guy decides he is going to perform this grand, epic fire sacrifice known as the Viswajit sacrifice.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at the strict, non-negotiable rules of this specific ritual, The mandate is absolute.
You must give away all of your worldly possessions.
Everything.
Yeah.
To the priests and the needy, every last piece of wealth, every animal, every comfort. The entire point of the ritual is to strip yourself bare, right? To publicly and spiritually prove your absolute non-attachment to the material world.
That is the theological theory, yes. But human nature rarely aligns with theological theory.
Just shocking.
Right. Vajrasrava's reality is deeply infected by vanity. He is not undertaking this massive sacrifice for spiritual liberation or out of a genuine desire for cosmic alignment.
He's doing it for social clout.
Entirely. He wants the fame, the elevated status, the sheer ego-stroking glory of being recognized as the pious magnate who performed the ultimate sacrifice. The problem, of course, is that he is utterly terrified of actually losing his wealth.
Right. He wants the spiritual tax write-off without actually paying the capital.
Yeah.
So what does this absolute fraud do? He starts distributing his cattle. But he isn't giving away his prime, healthy cows.
No, he's actively sorting through his herds.
He's giving away the old, barren, blind, half-dead cows that can't even produce milk anymore. They are literally a biological liability to him. He is dumping his garbage on the priests and branding it as a sacred, selfless offering.
It is a devastating, razor-sharp critique of institutionalized religion and the mechanical, insincere adherence to tradition that plagues almost every society.
It's gross.
It exposes the raw, ugly hypocrisy that so frequently underpins what the collective society deems holy. The text is pointing out that a ritual performed with a diseased, attached mind is not just useless, it actually generates profound negative karma.
I want to frame this in a way that hits closer to home for you listening. Imagine a corrupt, legacy-obsessed, modern billionaire. He hosts a massive, globally televised charity gala. He's standing at the podium, tears in his eyes, announcing a $50 million donation to build a children's hospital.
Oh, I can picture it perfectly.
Right. But behind the scenes, you know that the donation is being funded by aggressively shorting the pensions of his own working-class employees.
Yep.
And the hospital wing is legally structured to function as a massive tax haven for his shell corporations. The entire room is giving him a standing ovation. They're all playing the game. Everyone is nodding along to the illusion, except for his kid, who is standing in the front row watching this entire charade.
And that kid is Nachiketa. Unlike the sycophants in the crowd, Nachiketa possesses an innate, uncompromising lie detector for spiritual deceit.
He sees right through the bullshit.
He does. He's watching his father give away these wretched, dying cows, and he immediately recognizes the terrifying spiritual peril his father is courting. We have to understand the cultural stakes here, though.
Right. Context is key.
In ancient Indian society, filial piety was absolute law. Your parents were essentially living deities. Defying them, questioning their authority, or calling out their hypocrisy in a public, sacred setting was unthinkable. It was social and spiritual suicide.
But Nachiketa couldn't care less about social norms. He is wired for absolute truth. So he walks right up to his dad in the middle of this fake ego-stroking spectacle, and he asks a highly provocative, deeply disruptive question.
A very dangerous question.
He looks at his father and says, "Father, to whom are you going to give me?"
That question is a scalpel. It slices right through the facade.
I mean, it's such a power move for a 12-year-old.
It really is. By offering himself the absolute most valuable possession a father could possibly have, Nachiketa is forcing Vajrasrava's hand. He is daring his father to validate the ritual. It's as if he's saying, if you are truly giving away everything you own to prove your non-attachment, then give me away. Otherwise, admit that this entire sacrifice is a theatrical sham. He is pushing his father to look in the mirror and face the sickening depth of his own material attachments.
And the dad's initial reaction is to just ignore him.
Right.
Because the kid is being intensely annoying. He's ruining the PR moment. But Nachiketa is relentless. He doesn't just ask once and walk away. He asks it a second time. To whom will you give me?
And the father grits his teeth and ignores him again.
So Nachiketa asks a third time. He is repeatedly, methodically, publicly humiliating his father's fragile ego.
And that is when the dam breaks. Vajrasrava snaps. He completely loses his grip.
The mask slips.
The pious facade drops, the spiritual mask slips, and in a fit of blind, hypocritical rage, he turns to his own son and screams, "I give you to death."
I give you to death. I mean, the sheer carnage of that statement. It's the ultimate unforgivable parental tantrum.
It is absolute venom. Now, it is highly probable that Vajrasrava spoke out of momentary vexation.
Like he didn't actually mean it.
Right. It was a violent, impulsive curse designed simply to shut the boy up so the ritual could continue. He didn't literally intend to execute his son. But Nachiketa operates on a different frequency.
He takes things literally.
He embodies absolute sincerity and truth. He takes those fatal words not as an insult, not as a metaphor, but as a binding sacred mandate.
Oh, man.
If his father has decreed that he belongs to death, then to death he must go. He accepts the curse. And without a second thought, he simply turns around, abandons the physical world, and walks straight into the mortal abyss.
The father's fragile, ego-driven tantrum has just triggered a cosmic chain reaction. Nachiketa isn't just running away from home like an angry teenager.
Yeah.
He is purposefully marching down into the terrifying, unknown architecture of the underworld to cash in his father's curse.
Which initiates one of the most profound psychological strippings in philosophical literature. Nachiketa descends to the bleak, desolate abode of Yama, the Lord of Death. But there is a massive complication when he arrives. Death isn't home.
Which is such an objectively funny yet terrifying concept. You march down to hell, you cross the mortal threshold, you arrive at the gates of the underworld, and the boss is out running errands.
Exactly.
So what does Nachiketa do? He sits down at the gates of the void, and he waits. For 3 days and 3 nights, no food, no water, absolute stillness.
We cannot gloss over those 3 days. This waiting period is not just a physical fast. It is a terrifying, fundamentally necessary purgatory.
Why is it necessary?
From a psychological and neurological standpoint, you have to be completely emptied out to perceive reality. Think about what actually happens to the human organism when it is starved of all external input, all worldly dopamine.
You lose your mind.
Pretty much. No comfort, no distraction, no biological sustenance, just the agonizing, deafening silence of the void.
Your brain starts eating itself. Without external stimuli, the ego starts violently thrashing.
Precisely. The ego realizes it is no longer being fed by sensory data, and it panics. Nachiketa is being systematically stripped of his biological programming, his earthly desires, and his reliance on the physical meat suit. You have to undergo this horrific fasting of the ego before you are even remotely worthy to stand face-to-face with ultimate reality.
Is sensory deprivation turned up to a lethal cosmic degree? And then finally Yama comes back. And here's where our modern preconceptions get completely shattered. Because death isn't some cackling, pitchfork-wielding demon who's thrilled to have a new victim to torture.
Far from it. In this framework, Yama is depicted as an enlightened master. He is a pure deity, the ultimate administrator, strictly bound by universal law, which is known as Dharma.
Right.
And when Yama returns and sees this incredibly pure, spiritually potent boy starving at his door, he is deeply, deeply distressed.
Because in that ancient culture, the laws of hospitality are absolute. Neglecting a worthy guest, especially a spiritual seeker, is a massive cosmic faux pas.
It goes beyond a faux pas. It is a severe cosmic transgression. It literally throws the moral scales of the universe out of balance. Yama realizes with horror that he has made a grave error.
He messed up.
Big time. He has allowed a pure, truthful soul to suffer unnecessarily in his domain. The text explicitly warns that letting a good person go hungry in your house destroys your hopes, your merits, and your spiritual wealth. To rectify this immediately, to rebalance the karmic scales of the universe, Yama offers Nachiketa 3 boons.
3 wishes.
Exactly. 1 for every agonizing night the boy was left waiting, hungry and thirsty in the dark.
Okay, put yourself in this kid's shoes. You listening, and imagine this. You are 12 years old. You are literally negotiating with the Lord of Death, the executioner of all biological life. You hold 3 blank checks. You would think the immediate instinctual reaction would be, make me a god, or give me absolute immortality, or let me rule the world.
Sure, that's what most people would ask for.
But Nachiketa's first request is shockingly, almost frustratingly grounded.
His first request centers entirely on the resolution of earthly karma. For his first boon, Nachiketa asks that his father's violent anger be pacified.
Wow.
He asks that when Yama releases him back to the earthly realm, his father will welcome him with 0 trauma, 0 animosity, and absolute peace of mind. He wants his dad to be okay. Yama grants this instantly.
But I have to push back on this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate. Why start there? The kid has the foundational fabric of the universe at his fingertips, and his very first priority is to fix his dad's anger management issues. It seems like a waste of a wish from a deity.
It seems like a waste only if you misunderstand the mechanics of spiritual ascension. You absolutely cannot achieve spiritual liberation if your human shit is still a mess.
Elaborate on that.
It is an incredibly profound psychological truth that modern spirituality often ignores.
Yeah.
Unresolved terrestrial karma, earthly resentments, and especially parental trauma, these things act like dense, heavy iron chains wrapped around your psyche.
So you're saying that you can meditate all you want, but if you subconsciously hate your dad, you're not going anywhere?
Exactly. If you attempt to ascend to higher states of consciousness or probe the depths of the void, while your mind is still subconsciously plagued by the trauma of your father cursing you to death, that trauma will violently yank you back down to the baseline ego. You cannot merge with the infinite while a part of your mind is still anchored to a domestic dispute.
It's like trying to launch a spacecraft into orbit while the boosters are still bolted to the concrete launch pad.
Perfect analogy.
The sheer emotional maturity required to recognize that is staggering. Think about it. This kid was just verbally abused, cursed, and thrown away like garbage by a raging narcissistic parent. Yet his very first thought, his immediate priority when handed ultimate power, is to relieve his abuser's mental suffering.
It demonstrates an absolute breathtaking lack of ego. By forgiving his father and ensuring their reconciliation, Nachiketa achieves complete psychological closure. He cuts the anchor. And because that earthly emotional baggage is completely cleared out of his nervous system, he is now stabilized.
Ready.
He is internally unified, which means he is finally ready to ask for something exponentially more dangerous.
Which brings us to the second boon, the esoteric fire. Nachiketa asks Yama to teach him the specific fire sacrifice that grants passage to heaven. Now, I need you to clarify something here, because when an ancient Indian text talks about heaven, it is definitely not the Western Judeo-Christian concept of fluffy clouds, golden gates, and playing harps for eternity, is it?
No, not at all. That is a critical distinction. In the Vedic cosmological worldview, what they call swarga, or heaven, is ultimately just a highly refined material world.
So it's still physical.
It is a temporary dopamine extension. It is a realm of extended sensory enjoyment, absence of physical pain, and prolonged life, but it is fundamentally still subject to time, space, and causality.
So it's basically a VIP lounge in the casino of existence. You get free drinks, the chairs are velvet, and you feel great, but you're still in the casino, and eventually you run out of chips.
Precisely. You exhaust your accumulated spiritual merit, and when the merit runs out, you are unceremoniously ejected from the VIP lounge and you fall right back down into a physical body to suffer again.
Brutal.
But here's the crucial nuance. Nachiketa isn't actually asking for the VIP lounge. He is using the language of the ritual fire. But the real secret Yama imparts is deeply tantric. According to the frameworks of integral yoga and esoteric commentary, this second boon isn't about literally gathering wooden sticks and pouring clarified butter on a physical fire in a forest.
Right, because if it was just about burning wood, any idiot with a match could achieve liberation. We are talking about an internal, rigorous, practical methodology for hacking the central nervous system. This is where the text gets into hardcore spiritual alchemy. It is about transmuting raw, animalistic, biological energies into terrifying spiritual power.
Exactly. The text speaks of a triple work, which refers to three distinct internal fires that must be ignited and mastered. First, you have the psychic fire in the cave of the heart. This is the steady, illuminating flame that burns away the lower ego and petty emotional attachments. Then you have the middle fire, which is the active, brutal transmutation of your physical, vital, and mental animalistic energies.
You're literally feeding your traumas, your lusts, your anxieties, and your desires into this internal flame as fuel. You don't suppress them, you burn them.
Yes. You use the friction of your own biological suffering to generate heat. And the third fire, which is the most critical and dangerous one, is the agni of the self, descending from higher consciousness. To truly understand the mechanics of this, we have to look deeply into the esoteric physiology of the yogic tradition, specifically the Sahasrara chakra complex, located at the crown of the cranium.
Okay, I need you to map this out for me practically. Walk me through the mechanics, because reading the commentary on this felt less like reading philosophy and more like reading a highly classified manual for dismantling a biological nuclear bomb inside your own head.
It is incredibly precise, and historically it was considered intensely dangerous to practice without a master. The Sahasrara is described metaphorically as a magnificent lotus flower with exactly 1,000 petals organized into 20 distinct layers.
A 1,000 petals.
Now, unlike the lower energetic centers in the human body, like the throat or the heart, which are associated with specific spoken syllables, mantras, or vibrational sounds, the petals of the crown chakra contain no letters. Its seed mantra is the Visarga.
The Visarga, which translates to absolute silence.
Yeah.
But it's not just an empty quiet, right? It's the deafening, pregnant resonance that follows an utterance. It's the echo of creation. Just conceptualizing that feels heavy.
It is the silence that contains all potential noise. And as the vital energy, the kundalini, the raw evolutionary voltage stored at the base of the spine is awakened and forced to ascend past the third eye, it has to navigate a highly complex, perilous cluster of centers before it can achieve ultimate union.
So it travels upward.
Yes. It first hits the Manas chakra, which is tied directly to the sensory mind and the processing of external data. Then it reaches a deeply esoteric center known as the Bindu Visarga, located at the upper back of the head.
I want to pause on the Bindu Visarga, because this is where the terminology gets wild, and I need to understand the why behind it. The texts talk about uniting the white Bindu with the red Bindu, and they explicitly associate the white Bindu with semen and the red Bindu with menstrual fluid. To a modern listener, that sounds like bizarre, primitive sex magic. What is actually happening here mechanistically?
I understand why it sounds jarring, but you have to look past the gross biological terms to the archetypal mechanics they represent. The white Bindu represents static masculine consciousness, pure, unmoving awareness.
Okay.
The red Bindu represents kinetic feminine energy, the dynamic, violent force of creation and manifestation. In normal biological human existence, these two polarities are separated. They seek external union through physical reproduction, which simply creates another biological body trapped in suffering.
So biological sex is essentially the energy escaping the system to create more of the system.
Precisely. What the yogi is doing at the Bindu Visarga is forcefully short-circuiting that biological imperative. By intensely concentrating and manipulating the nervous system, the practitioner attempts to violently smash these two cosmic polarities, creation and reception, kinetic energy and static awareness together within the singular column of their own spine.
You are collapsing the duality of the universe inside your own brain.
Yes. It is an internal alchemical fusion, and if that immense energy isn't preserved and contained through absolutely rigorous physical and mental discipline, the divine nectar it produces just falls down into the digestive fire.
It gets wasted.
It gets burned up by a mundane biological existence. You just get a temporary rush, and then you get hungry or tired, and the energy dissipates. But if the yogi can sustain the fusion, the energy continues upward, and it encounters the Mahanada.
The great sound, which the texts say is shaped like a plow.
It is the primal, violent roaring sound from which all physical creation erupts. To hear it is to stand at the edge of the Big Bang. And above that is the Nirvana chakra, marking the absolute end of the central nervous channel.
And then what?
Once the energy pierces this, it enters ever higher, increasingly terrifying levels of consciousness dissolution until the illusion of the individual self shatters completely and awareness passes into the supreme void, achieving absolute non-dual absorption.
I want to offer an analogy here to see if I'm tracking the mechanics of this fire. This kind of esoteric yoga is not meditation in the modern sense. It's not downloading a slick app and listening to rain sounds for 10 minutes to lower your blood pressure.
Not even close.
Imagine you have a standard computer CPU that's your biological brain. It has safety parameters, temperature limits, and processing caps. What Nachiketa is asking for is the code to deliberately overclock the CPU. He wants to run so much raw, unadulterated voltage through the system that the physical casing literally melts off. He is intentionally bypassing the biological hardware limitations so the raw code of his consciousness can forcefully merge with the cosmic cloud.
That is a brutally accurate analogy. Nachiketa is demanding the precise yogic mechanics to ignite the central nervous system and blow the crown of the skull open to merge with the infinite. He understands that every mundane weakness, every petty anger, every sexual desire is just misdirected cosmic voltage. He's learning how to offer those weaknesses as sacrifices into this internal fire to be violently burned and transformed into ascension fuel.
And Yama is so blown away by this 12-year-old's intellect and capacity to handle this dangerous tech that he actually names the fire after him, the Nachiketa fire.
Quite the honor.
So let's look at the scoreboard. He's secured earthly harmony by resolving his father's karma. He's mastered the cosmic energetic hack of the central nervous system. He has the ultimate spiritual power. Now he cashes in the third boon, and he drops the ultimate existential nuke on death itself.
The third boon is where the text transitions from profound to terrifying.
Nachiketa looks death dead in the eye, And he asks the one core question that has haunted every human being who has ever possessed a prefrontal cortex. He says, when a man dies, some say he is, others that he is not. Instructed by you, I desire to understand this. He is demanding to look directly into the pitch-black void behind biological cessation. He wants death to explain exactly what happens when the meat suit flatlines.
And this is where the narrative shifts brilliantly. Yama, the Lord of Death, the supreme executioner of all biological life in the cosmos, suddenly panics.
Which is insane. Death itself starts sweating.
Yama tries absolutely everything to back out of this corner. He tells Nachiketa, look, this subject is too incredibly subtle. It is too confusing. Even the ancient gods debated this and couldn't wrap their heads around it. Please let me off the hook. Ask for literally anything else.
He's begging him.
And when Nachiketa refuses to back down, Yama resorts to bribery. And these aren't just normal, run-of-the-mill bribes. They are extreme, visceral, almost pornographic temptations designed to exploit every single layer of mammalian programming.
Let's list what he offers, because it's a buffet of ultimate biological fulfillment. He offers the kid immense, unfathomable material wealth. He offers him sons and grandsons who will live for centuries, the ultimate biological legacy. He offers countless cattle, elephants, horses, and gold. He says, I will give you an absolute, uncontested empire on earth, and you can live and rule for as long as you desire. He even offers literal heavenly maidens, driving chariots, playing enchanting music, whose sole cosmic purpose is to service his every sensual and sexual desire. Yama is basically saying, I will give you infinite dopamine, infinite power, infinite sex, and infinite time to enjoy it. Please do not make me explain the terrifying mystery of what happens when you die.
You have to analyze why Yama chooses these specific bribes. He is testing the integrity of the yogic container Nachiketa just built. Wealth appeals to the root chakra, the need for security. Legacies and sons appeal to the biological imperative to reproduce. Heavenly maidens appeal to the vital sexual energies.
It's extremely targeted.
Empire appeals to the ego and intellect. Yama is firing high-caliber rounds at every single weak point in the human psyche. What's absolutely fascinating is how Nachiketa responds. He doesn't even flinch. He demonstrates a psychological state known as vairagya, which is absolute, cold, uncompromising dispassion.
He rejects all of it. He looks at this infinite buffet of earthly and heavenly pleasure, this endless parade of dopamine, and he essentially calls it garbage. He points out the dark, underlying physiological reality of these bribes. These things just wear away the energy of the nervous system.
He recognizes the biological trap. Nachiketa coldly tells Yama, these are merely things of a day. They exhaust the vigor of all the senses. Even the longest life you can give me is fundamentally microscopic on a cosmic scale. Wealth cannot satisfy the soul because everything you are offering me is ultimately subject to decay and subject to you.
You are offering me toys that you are eventually going to destroy. It's the ultimate logical checkmate. He says, why would I accept your bribes of wealth and women when I know that in 100 years or 1,000 years, death are just going to show up and rip them all away from me anyway? He realizes that sensory gratification, no matter how immensely scaled up, is a biological dead end.
And Yama is utterly stunned. He realizes the boy genuinely cannot be bought. Nachiketa has proven himself to be a true spiritual warrior, entirely immune to psychological and biological bribery. And because of this absolute, unshakable display of vairagya, Yama has no choice left. The cosmic law binds him. He must open the floodgates and deliver the ultimate, unvarnished teachings about the architecture of reality.
Which brings us to the Great Divide, the fundamental choice that every single human being makes every minute of every day. Yama introduces the axiology of choice, Shreyas versus Preyas.
Shreyas, meaning the good or the excellent, and Preyas, meaning the pleasant or the dear. This dichotomy cuts to the absolute bedrock of human motivation. Yama states unequivocally that these two paths bind a person. They present themselves constantly, pulling you in completely opposite metaphysical directions.
Let's dissect Preyas first, because, let's be honest, this is where 99.9% of humanity sets up camp and lives their entire lives. This is the path of the pleasant, immediate sensory gratification. It's the dopamine addiction. It is the desperate attempt to numb our existential dread with transient comforts.
Preyas is fundamentally driven by avidya, which is spiritual ignorance. It is the biological craving of the meat suit. It feels incredibly soothing and validating in the moment. When you eat the cake, when you get the promotion, when you scroll the feed, the brain rewards you with chemical hits.
Right, feels good.
But the ultimate metaphysical consequence of choosing Preyas is that it leads you straight back into the agonizing machinery of samsara. By constantly choosing what is pleasant, you chain your consciousness to the physical realm, trapping yourself in the endless, violent, inescapable cycle of birth, decay, disease, and death.
It's so visceral when you map it onto modern life. Preyas is you lying in bed at 2 a.m., your retinas burning from the blue light of your phone, doom scrolling through outrage bait while eating processed junk food. You're doing it because it feels good right now. It's a pacifier for your highly stressed nervous system in the short term. But mechanistically, it is literally destroying your attention span, rotting your physical body, and degrading your soul. You are choosing decay because it's comfortable.
Exactly. It is the slow suicide of convenience. And on the exact opposite side, we have Shreyas, the good. The etymological root of Shreyas implies light, cosmic support, and ultimate spiritual welfare. This is the relentless pursuit of absolute truth.
That there's a catch.
A huge catch. Here's the brutal truth that the Upanishad doesn't hide. Shreyas demands immense, agonizing sacrifice of the ego. It requires severe, uncompromising inner discipline.
Right. If Preyas is the 2 a.m. doom scroll, Shreyas is forcing yourself out of a warm bed at 4 a.m. to train for an ultramarathon in the freezing rain. Or in the spiritual context, it's sitting on a cushion in absolute silence and forcing yourself to confront every single ugly, traumatic, hypocritical, petty part of your own psyche without allowing yourself to look away or reach for a distraction.
Yes.
One path is incredibly easy in the moment, but ultimately destroys you. The other path is pure burning agony in the moment, but it is the only thing that sets you completely free.
The great Indian philosopher Swami Vivekananda made a profound observation about this exact verse. He noted that individuals who desperately seek immediate satisfaction, who grab at the pleasant without considering the long-term spiritual devastation, are not masters of their destiny. They are merely slaves to their own biology.
Slaves to the wheat suit.
Exactly. True heroes, what the text calls the dhira, the wise, courageous ones, are those willing to endure severe initial hardship, psychological flaying, and the denial of the senses for the sake of ultimate spiritual realization.
So let's say we reject the biological dopamine hits. We choose the freezing rain. We choose Shreyas. We undergo the psychological flaying. But what exactly are we trying to save here? If the physical body is definitively destined to rot and be eaten by worms, what is the actual thing that survives the violent cessation of physical death? What is the core?
This brings us to the absolute ontological nucleus of the Katha Upanishad. Yama delivers one of the most famous, uncompromising statements about the true self, the Atman, in all of human history. He tells him, Nachiketa, the knowing self is not born, it does not die, it has not sprung from anything, nothing has sprung from it, birthless, eternal, everlasting, and ancient. It is not killed when the body is killed.
It is not killed when the body is killed. I want to dig deep into Adi Shankaracharya's commentary on this specific verse, because if you really understand his logic, it demands a complete, instantaneous psychological divorce from your physical avatar.
Shankaracharya, who is arguably the greatest master of strict non-dualism, breaks this verse down with devastating, airtight logic. He points out that all physical, biological existence is trapped in 6 unavoidable sequential modifications. Every physical thing experiences birth, existence, growth, maturity, decay, and death. Your body's undergoing these modifications right this second. Your cells are decaying. But the Upanishad explicitly denies the first and last modifications for the Atman. It declares that the Atman is not born and it does not die. Therefore, Shankaracharya argues, it logically negates all the intermediate modifications as well. The Atman does not grow, it does not mature, and it cannot decay.
The text uses the word Purana, right, meaning ancient. But Shankara interprets that specifically as incapable of development. And his reasoning for this is fascinating, is because the Atman has no parts. If you build a clay pot, or a human body, or a star, it is constructed of smaller constituent pieces assembled together. And the fundamental law of entropy dictates that anything made of parts will eventually break down and separate. But the Atman is uncompounded, it has no pieces, it is just raw, indivisible, untainted consciousness.
Exactly. It is vipashit, which translates to indestructible intelligence. It is entirely causeless. Shankaracharya uses a brilliant, highly visceral metaphor to force the mind to understand this. Imagine the Atman's presence inside the biological body is like space akasha contained inside a physical clay jar.
Hold on, I want to push back on this metaphor because there's a friction here. You just said the Atman is vipasha, indestructible intelligence, but now you're comparing it to empty space inside a jar. Empty space is dead. It doesn't think. It doesn't have intelligence. So how do we reconcile a dead void with supreme intelligence?
That is a brilliant friction to highlight. When Shankara uses the metaphor of space, he is not describing the Atman's nature as dead or empty. He is describing its relationship to the physical container. In our physical world, space is the only thing that accommodates objects without ever interacting with them or being changed by them. The intelligence of the Atman isn't a thinking, calculating brain intelligence. It is pure illumination.
Ah, I see.
It is the light that allows the mind to think, just as space is the dimension that allows the jar to exist. The metaphor is about untainted witnessing.
Okay, I track that. So let's play out the jar metaphor. You have the empty space, the witnessing illumination inside the clay jar. If you take a heavy iron hammer and violently smash that clay jar into 1,000 tiny pieces, what happens to the empty space that was inside it?
Absolutely nothing. The space doesn't bleed, it doesn't get bruised, it doesn't shatter. The jar is completely violently annihilated, but the space remains completely untouched, exactly as it was before the jar was formed. The Atman is just the space.
It observes the destruction of its own biological machinery as a completely silent, unaffected witness.
Yes. But recognizing that is incredibly difficult because we identify so completely with the clay jar. We feel every crack. The Upanishad says this Atman is hidden away in the guha, the cave of the heart.
Hridaya Guha. This is a highly esoteric motif. The root word gu literally means to cover or to hide. It actually shares the exact same linguistic root as the Greek word for crypt. We're not talking about the biological organ pumping blood in your chest. We are talking about the deepest, most secret, most heavily guarded psychic crypt of the human being.
And it is guarded by incredibly thick, dense layers of ego, traumatic emotions, and frantic external desires. It's the ultimate blind spot of human perception. Think about it. The Atman is the very thing looking out through your eyes, which means you can never simply turn your eyes around to look at it. The eye cannot see itself.
So how do you actually access it? If I can't look at it, how do I find the crypt?
That is the terrifying, agonizing challenge of spiritual practice. To realize the Atman, the wise individual must forcefully, violently turn their attention inward. You have to actively tear your gaze away from the seductive, colorful distractions of the phenomenal world and plunge into this incredibly dark, claustrophobic inward sanctuary.
Sounds brutal.
It is. You have to bypass the screaming noise of the mind, navigate through your own unresolved traumas until you reach a state of terrifying stillness where the ego collapses completely and only pure, unadulterated awareness remains.
Which, let's be real, sounds nearly impossible.
Mm-hmm.
How does a normal human being actually operate that way while still walking around in the world, having a job, paying taxes, and dealing with traffic? To help Nachiketa visualize the mechanics of this brutal internal battle, Yama gives him what is essentially a masterclass in ancient cognitive cybernetics. He introduces the chariot metaphor.
This is outlined in verses 1.3.3 through 1.3.9. This allegory is a structural, functional roadmap of human cognitive architecture. It explains exactly how the space interacts with the jar. Yama says, know the Atman to be the master of the chariot, the body, chariot, the intellect, the charioteer, and the mind, the reins. The senses, they say, are the horses, the objects of sense, what they range over.
Okay, let's map this onto the meat suit piece by piece, because the causality here is brilliant. The chariot itself is your gross physical body. It's just a biological vehicle built to navigate the brutal, friction-heavy terrain of life. It has wheels, it has mass, it requires maintenance, and it inevitably breaks down over time.
And pulling this physical chariot are the horses, representing your five senses, your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. By their very biological nature, these horses are wild and perpetually hungry. They desperately want to run toward the roads being the objects of sensory perception.
They want to consume.
Exactly. They want the sweet food, the sexual gratification, the soft comforts, the dopamine hits. They want to consume.
And connecting those wild, hungry horses to the chariots are the reins. The reins represent the mind, or manas. But here is the absolute most crucial mechanistic part of this metaphor. The reins cannot drive themselves. The mind, the manas, synthesizes all the raw sensory input from the horses, but it has zero autonomous executive control. It's just a transmission mechanism. It's a dumb cable connecting the horses to the driver.
Which brings us to the most vital active component of the entire system, the charioteer, the driver. This represents the intellect, the buddhi. The buddhi is the faculty of absolute discrimination, willpower, and executive decision-making.
And sitting quietly in the very back of the chariot, not pulling the reins, not sweating, not yelling at the horses, not doing anything at all, is the passenger, the Atman, the silent, eternal witness just going along for the ride.
The Upanishad outlines two deeply divergent outcomes based entirely on the condition of the charioteer. In the state of ignorance, if the buddhi, the intellect, is weak, or if it is asleep at the wheel, or if it is intoxicated by earthly desires, what happens mechanically?
The charioteer drops the reins.
Exactly. And the moment the driver drops the reins, the mind loses its connection to executive control. The senses realize no one is driving. The horses go completely feral.
They just run wild.
They violently chase whatever sensory object they want, dragging the entire vehicle off the path, ultimately crashing the meat suit straight into the ditch of samsara. This represents a life of addiction, reactivity, and endless suffering. The passenger is trapped in a crashing vehicle.
But in the state of mastery, the buddhi is wide awake. It is sober. It is highly discriminative. The charioteer grips the reins of the mind with absolute white-knuckled ruthlessness. Through the mind, the senses are whipped into shape. They are broken like well-trained stallions. They only move when and where the intellect permits them to move. The chariot stays strictly on the agonizing, difficult path of Shreyas, taking the silent passenger to ultimate liberation.
This ancient metaphor strongly anticipates and, in many ways, surpasses modern psychological models of executive function and cognitive control. You only survive, you only achieve fulfillment when the higher intellect violently dominates the journey, actively overriding the lower automatic animalistic impulses of your biology.
And Yama doesn't stop with just the chariot. He takes this functional framework and expands it into the tattvas, the exact, rigorous ontological hierarchy of the entire universe. He maps the path from the grossest physical reality all the way back to the absolute void.
It is a sequence of cosmic superiority. Yama explains that the objects of perception are superior to the physical senses.
Wait, why are the objects superior?
Because the senses are merely biological hardware designed specifically to apprehend those objects. Superior to the objects is the mind manas, because the mind processes and constructs the reality of those objects. Superior to the mind is the intellect buddhi, because the intellect analyzes and commands the mind.
Okay, that tracks. And then we leave the individual human biology behind and go cosmic. He says superior to the individual intellect is the cosmic mind, Mahat. It's the collective intelligence of the universe. Beyond Mahat is the avyakta, the unmanifest, the terrifying, dark, pregnant seed state of the cosmos before the Big Bang even happened, the absolute 0 point of matter.
And finally, beyond the unmanifest, beyond the seed of creation itself, is the Purusha, the pure, supreme, formless, non-dual consciousness, the absolute highest destination. There is nothing beyond Purusha.
But I want to make sure we don't just treat this like a list of vocabulary words to memorize for a philosophy exam. This isn't just theory. This is a practical, brutal, step-by-step roadmap for advanced meditation.
Precisely. You cannot simply think about this hierarchy. You must actively, psychologically collapse each level into the one above it during deep contemplation. You sit down and you meditate to consciously dissolve the raw physical senses into the mind. You stop feeling the body.
You literally shut the sensors down.
Yes. Then you forcefully collapse the chattering mind into the silent, observing intellect. You surrender your individual intellect into the cosmic will of Mahat. You dissolve the universe back into the unmanifest seed. And ultimately, you merge all remaining identity into the absolute, formless Purusha until only the void remains. It is an active uncreation of yourself.
It's reverse engineering your own existence. But achieving this level of cognitive control, gripping those reins, is not a one-and-done deal. It's not like you hit a button, collapse the tattvas once, and say, cool, I'm enlightened now, time to chill. It is the most dangerous, precarious tightrope walk in existence.
Which brings us to the chilling, visceral climax of the text's practical instruction, the razor's edge.
Yama drops this clarion call to humanity. Uttishtata jagrata, arise, awake. It's a command designed to shake you violently out of your biological slumber. And then he issues a terrifying warning about the nature of the path you are now walking. He says, it is kushrasa tara nishitaratya.
Like the sharp edge of a razor is that path hard to tread and difficult to cross.
Think about the visceral, bloody reality of that metaphor. Imagine taking your bare feet and trying to balance your entire body weight on a microscopically sharpened edge of a straight razor. You are balancing perfectly between two catastrophic extremes, falling to one side into hedonistic, animalistic indulgence and biological decay, and falling to the other side into bitter, ascetic nihilism and spiritual pride. It requires microscopic precision. Every step cuts you.
Adi Shankaracharya notes in his commentary that the Upanishad is speaking here almost like a compassionate but frantic mother screaming to save her child from wandering blindly off a cliff. Because the ultimate reality is infinitely subtle, the path to it cannot be walked casually or as a weekend hobby. It demands unbroken, exhausting attention. It is a path of extreme psychological violence to the ego.
So how do you walk a razor without slicing your feet completely off? The text drops one of the most rigorous, unromantic definitions of yoga in ancient literature. It says, this firm holding back of the senses is what is known as yoga. It doesn't mention stretching. It doesn't mention feeling peaceful. Yoga is active, forceful containment. It is the charioteer holding the feral horses in a chokehold.
But the text immediately follows that definition of yoga with a vital, profound, and deeply unsettling caveat. It states, yoga comes and goes.
Oh man, that is so haunting. Yoga comes and goes.
It shatters the New Age illusion of permanent, effortless enlightenment. The state of sensory withdrawal, that absolute grip on the reins, is highly volatile. It is not a permanent acquisition. It requires constant, vigilant, exhausting maintenance. A single moment of negligence, a state what the text calls being apramata, a single second where the intellect's grip on the reins relaxes because you got tired or you got cocky, and the horses bolt.
You fall off the razor back into the mud. You crash the chariot.
Yes. You fall catastrophically from spiritual heights straight back into the biological meat grinder. The higher you are on the razor, the worse the fall. You have to maintain absolute, unyielding vigilance every single waking second of your existence until the biological body finally expires.
So let's synthesize this absolute karmic shit show of a deep dive.
Yeah.
We started with a 12-year-old kid calling out his father's hypocritical, ego-driven bullshit. We followed him as he willingly starved his ego into submission at death's door. We watched him resolve his earthly trauma, master the esoteric fires that melt the crown chakra, and reject infinite pornographic biological bribes for the unvarnished truth. We mapped the ontological carnage of the universe and realized that this physical body is just a decaying chariot destined to break down, while you are the untouchable void in the shattered jar.
It demands that we look death squarely in the eye and ask the ultimate questions without flinching or seeking comfort. The Katha Upanishad vehemently, violently rejects the comforting notion that peace can ever be found in material wealth or physical longevity or the desperate pursuit of the pleasant. It urges humanity to awaken their sleeping intellect, violently discipline their chaotic mind, and drive the chariot toward absolute liberation, no matter how much it hurts.
It's an architecture of immortality that costs you your entire ego. So I want to leave you with a chilling question to mull over. Later today, when you instinctively reach for your phone to doom scroll, or when you react in sudden, petty anger to a minor inconvenience, or when you find yourself craving a fleeting comfort, I want you to stop. Take a hard, unblinking look at your internal chariot. Ask yourself in this exact moment, are you the awake, merciless driver gripping the reins, or are you just the terrified passenger, being dragged off a cliff by wild, unbridled horses?
A powerful, terrifying thought to carry forward into the fray.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the abyss. Stay awake out there.